They're also not going to let you get away with much. Like, you haven't built up any credibility. They've never seen you win a hand, so they not going to let you bluff hands through. But again, that all depends on what types of situations in terms of how you're running bad looks. If while you were running bad, you were doing a lot of bluffing as well, it's not going to work. People are not going to buy into it, which opens up another opportunity if cards do turn for you to get value from that. So nothing you do at the table is something that you can't use as far as table image to exploit your opponents, because they're going to look to exploit you. If you are against a player who you see bluff 6 times in a row, how are you going to exploit that? You're going to start calling them more, right? Well, if I'm that player, I know that. So I'm going to start bluffing less. So table image is always important to understand that it's an ever-flowing, ever-changing thing. A lot of it based on, of course, your appearance and your, what you're saying at the table. But most of it, especially in the early going, is going to be based on how you've played the hands this far. Say you're on vacation, you visit Atlantic City. You're not from there, and you sit down in the game and no one knows who you are and you don't know any of them. Well, is that an advantage or a disadvantage for you? And I think you can look at this 2 ways. On one hand, the fact that no one knows what your tendencies are gives you an advantage because they're not sure what you're capable of. The downfall, of course, is you don't know how well all these players know each other, right? So there may be some dynamics amongst the players where they know that, that Johnny likes to bluff in his spot. You don't know that yet, so this guy's raising with a weaker hand to get him out, and you're just looking at a bet and a raise thinking, wow, that must be strong and strong, where everyone else may have information that you don't. So there's pros and cons to being a new player, and you just have to be very aware in the early going that everything you do from the outset is going to affect people's perception immediately. So if you one of the first hands bluff, everyone's going to see you as a guy who bluffs all of a sudden, especially if they're paying attention. When you're paying attention to what's happening with your opponents, it's also extremely important to be aware of your own personal table image, right? And you should also be aware that the perceived image that people have of you may not be right based on what's just happened, but they're confused by what's happened. So let's just talk about a real example. Let's say you raised 4 hands in a row. In all 4 hands, you bet the flop, you bet the turn, and you went all in on the river, right? So what are your opponents going to think when they see that? They're going to think, well, this guy's playing a little bit like a maniac. He was probably bluffing in some of those hands. Meanwhile, it's very possible, theoretically possible, that you had the absolute nuts every single time. But you need to be aware that just because you weren't bluffing doesn't mean that everyone else at the table doesn't think you were bluffing. So, again, really focusing in on everyone else at the table in terms of what they're doing, but understanding that the flow of hands and the way that they come to you is going to affect people's perception. You fold 4 rounds in a row because you're not getting any good cards, people may falsely think that you're extremely conservative. So they're going to have your range dead wrong when you do open up. So when you finally open, they're going to be like, oh man, this guy opened up, he never opened. So they're going to think you have aces or kings or queens. Sometimes, you'll be at the table and maybe you don't play a single hand for 4 rounds because you're just getting, garbage hands. Well, that's going to leave an impression on your opponents who now think, well, this player is extremely tight. So when you actually do open, let's say you open under the gun, they're going to think, wow, he hasn't played a hand in an hour. He probably has aces, kings, or queens. So you need to be aware of that, what it opens up for you. So now that everyone thinks you're this really tight player, you should be able to steal pots when you need to. So always understanding that your table image is an ebb and flow situation. It changes from moment to moment, and there's a lot of things you can do, which we'll get into, in terms of manipulating people's image of you. And we'll talk about how sometimes making a suboptimal play, where you maybe make a mistake, or you might even show a hand. And this is a psychological warfare type of game that only the elite should really mess with, but sometimes you're going to show a hand to specifically plant a seed that you're going to exploit later. The best type of player you want to be is a chameleon. Ideally, what you want to have is a situation where, people talk about how you play, and you got 3 people over there saying, oh man, he's a complete maniac. And then the other 3 going, huh? He's tight as a rock. He never plays a hand. You always want to be adapting and changing. So your ability to access and understand how people perceive you shouldn't force you to adjust what your playing style is. So if you sit at a table and everyone at that table thinks you're a crazy bluffer, it's not going to work. So you need to really just go back into value bet mode, play more conservatively. other side of the coin, if everyone thinks of you as the Rock of Gibraltar, who never even attempts a bluff, that's an opportunity that opens up for you where you should start increasing your bluffing frequency. So you might become more of an aggressive player than normal. So I'd say that I understand that certainly there's always going to be different personality types, and certain styles are going to be more what you'd like to play, but it's important to always be able to adjust and adapt, because if you only play that way and only that style, they just have their read on you, and they're going to be able to exploit you. And it's a great opportunity to take advantage of that if you're willing and able to sort of come out of your shell and try something different. When you're cultivating a table image, or you're doing some advertising, or you're setting up your opponents, you have to ask yourself, okay, well, if I'm giving up this edge, for example, by maybe playing a little more loosely than I want to or anything like that, how long am I going to get to play with these people? All right? So if you do this in a tournament and you set up this great table image where you run a bunch of bluffs and you're just about to exploit it, and then, the floor man comes by and says, okay, we're breaking this table, and you're like, huh? Wasted. All that work that you put into creating a table image is no longer valuable, because you're going to be at a new table and no one there knows how well you were playing beforehand. So in a cash game, you can think a lot more long-term in terms of your table image and how to set that up. But in tournaments, you don't really have the luxury quite as often to, do that, unless you know, for example, your table's not going to break all day. That's why I think every bit of information you can get, whether it's live or tournaments, you should have. So, if they don't have a breaking order on the table, you should be mindful of that. The structures, when the rebuys in, all these kinds of things are important for you to know, so that you're not surprised by situations, and you don't, miscalculate by setting up a table image in a spot where you're not going to get to capitalize on it. We've talked about self-awareness being extremely important, okay? So if you find yourself in a situation where your table image is being the tight player who never bluffs, never does anything like that, this is an opportunity. Anytime people have you pegged a specific type of player, if you play exactly as they expect, you're going to play right into their hands, and they're going to play perfectly against you. So when you continue to play that way, that's not in your benefit. So what you need to do is make adjustments. You can get away with so much more than the average player. So in a situation where if anyone else bluff this river, they get called, you might not, because you've set up that table, and that can be very profitable as well, as long as it's subtle enough. One of the things that we do when we make adjustments based on exploitation is we do them in subtle ways where we don't wake people up to the fact that we're exploiting. So if you all of a sudden go from the player to start playing really reckless, well, now everyone's going to readjust, and they're going to say, okay, he's no longer the tight player, he's now the wild. So you want to make them subtle, pick up pots here and there occasionally. You'll get away with a lot more than the average player. I used to use sort of 3 basic levels of thinking, in poker. It was always, first and foremost, like, okay, what do I have? That's like level 1, right? If you really begin, what do I have, right? Level 2 is, what does my opponent have, right? Third is, what does my opponent think that I have, right? Now that continues to go to level 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever level you want to be at, and it's always a constant, what do you think that I think that you think that I think, and you keep going on with that. Part of the fun with that whole metagame thing is it's kind of important to have an idea of what level your opponent's thinking. So if you're up there and up in the sky on level 9, you're playing with an opponent who's really on just level 1 thinking, looking at their own hand, all the tricks and all the stuff you're doing is completely lost on them. So it really becomes important to have a deeper understanding in terms of what level are my opponents thinking. One of the things you want to avoid, when talking about poker hands is always or never. Typically the correct answer to any poker question someone asks me is, it depends, right? It depends on the situation, it depends on the opponent, it depends on what I did the last 4 or 5 times. You never want to fall in the traps of saying, you should always raise with aces no matter what. Well, I can probably think of a few situations where you might not want to, or, you should never fall in the draw on the turn if you're not getting the right price, or something along those lines. Stay away from absolutes, because they can get you into trouble. Sometimes what we're going to do to really fool our opponents is we're going to make a play that might be suboptimal, right? It might seem like in this situation, well, that was right? So everyone watching thinking, oh, you got a live one over here. We're going to take advantage of it. And we're going to use that, and later we're going to plant that seed and we're going to exploit their perception of it. So for many years, people watch me play on TV, high stakes poker show. You couldn't bluff me because I always called, right? I always call. So now I'm aware that my opponents think he overcalled. So what does that mean that they're going to do? They're going to bluff me less. So what does that allow me to do? Now I can start folding. Anytime you develop a strategy, you want to pay attention to how people are reacting to it. So let's say, for example, you've been overbetting, and you've overbet 4 hands in a row, and no one's called that overbet. So how should you adjust going forward? Well, you have to assume that your opponents, since they haven't called, A, obviously they don't really like to call these bets, but also B, they're going to increasingly become more and more suspicious, right? They didn't see any of the hands, you didn't show any of them, so they're going to assume that some of those were bluffs. You could have had the nuts all 4 times, right? But they might assume that some of those are bluffs. So if there's going to be any sort of metagame adjustment there, I would say that I wouldn't factor in any bluff. Even though it seems as though, well, hey, people are folding a lot to this overbet, I would continue to do what I'm doing, expecting people to make the adjustment and start calling their overbets. If they start seeing the overbet as the norm, like, well, that's what he does a lot, then, okay, eventually they're going to think that I'm balanced enough to be bluffing there. So, for example, I can exploit there by actually not being balanced and just always having it and expecting people to eventually say, yeah, well, he's got to be bluffing one of these times. Whether you're in a cash game or, a tournament, sometimes you're going to be in a situation where it appears as though you're picking on a play, right? So, for example, they keep raising and you keep 3-betting, and, they're folding. You 3-bet them and they keep folding. So they've done that 5 or 6 times. So the question is, how is that going to change the metagame going forward? The fact that, you're going to be perceived as a big bully. You may have had, aces every time, but as long as you're not showing the card, that player doesn't know that. So what adjustment are they likely to make? Well, one of the things, one of the weapons they can use, obviously aside from just playing maybe a little tighter, is they may start 4-betting you, okay? And they're going to now start 4-betting you with hands that maybe otherwise they wouldn't have 4-bet you with earlier on before they'd seen this develop. So what does that mean for you? That means that the range of that 4-bet is going to be weaker, which means you should probably continue more often with a slightly weaker part of your range. So as if this was the very player, he raises, you 3-bet, they 4-bet, you're going to put them on a very conservative range. But if you've already and now they 4-bet you, you significantly decrease the value of the range that you're up against for that 4-bet. So we're going to take a look at a real-life example between 2 of the more famous players in poker, Antonio Esfandiari and Tony G.
Ace-Jack for Antonio, who raises. King-Deuce for Tony G. Calls. Ike folds.
I'll take one.
Mercier's out. So 2 to the flop.
Oh, I'm glad the whole cams are back. I felt like Alex Trebek when he's not on the set of Jeopardy.
The answer is 5-deuce-9. The question is, what is the flop?
We'll see if Antonio continues here.
He does, betting 3,200. Tony G with bottom pair calls.
Pretty rare to see Tony fold any pair on the flop.
The turn, the 3 of clubs.
And he's right not to. He's still got the best hand. Antonio's picked up a gut shot.
And checks.
That 3 isn't exactly a scary card for Tony, even though it is an overcard.
Players to go on tilt, to make decisions that they should think. So when you're playing poker, guess what? You're going to have to do a lot of thinking, right? And how you approach thinking is going to affect your results in the long run. And the best way to really effectively learn how to properly think about poker is to do a lot of your hard work in the lab, away from the table, where you decide sort of how to approach and tackle an order of operations in terms of how you think through a hand. So, for example, if you're on a flop and you're facing a bet of 300 from an opponent, what's the first thing that you think about? Okay, for me, it's maybe what's the strength of my hand. Okay. Second thing I might think of is what range of hands do I think my opponent may have. The third thing is, all right, what are the pot odds I'm being laid? And so now I have a formula that once I've done this as many times as I have, it becomes like breathing. But it's important to have an idea of what you want to be thinking about, because there's so many variables in poker. What does he look like? What has he done last time? There's so many things to think about. If you don't have sort of kind of like an order of operations for how you proceed in this way, you're going to end up missing clues and missing important parts of the hand that you didn't think about. So very important before you even sit at a table to think about how you're going to think. One of the most important things to think about when thinking about thinking is what should you spend your time and energy thinking about. Too many players I see focus on results, and the results oriented. So, they fold 9-4 of diamonds because it was the correct decision. They notice that on the flop it was 9-9-4, and they start thinking to themselves, man, maybe I should have played that. Why? Based on what? Based on the fact that it actually came? You don't want to let emotion drive your decisions. You don't want emotion to supersede logic. You have to focus on making the best decisions available to you when they present themselves. And typically what emotion does, it gets in the way of that and causes players to go on tilt, make decisions that they shouldn't otherwise. So you decide before you even start playing poker, like, what is the right way to play 9-4 offsuit, okay? You come to the determination that it's a fold. The fact that 9-4 offsuit would have won the last 3 pots doesn't change the fact that when you were thinking about how to play these situations, you decided it was a fold. If you do all your, lab work and decide that 9-6 offsuit is not a hand that you want to call a raise with, and you notice that 2 hands in a row, you folded 9-6 and it would have won, that shouldn't have any effect on your logical process for how you think about a hand. That's just emotion talk. And essentially what emotion does at the poker table, it gets in the way of logic, and the idea of a rush or, I feel like I won a pot, I'm just going to win this one, that just gets in the way of thinking about the game the correct way. To this day, when I walk through the casino and I see people playing baccarat, and I notice that they've got their little, pad of paper and they're writing down, player, bank, looking for patterns and trying to detect. Well, it came, player 5 times in a row, so what exactly does that mean in terms of how you should bet the next one? And the correlation doesn't actually make any sense or exist, but it's very easy for gamblers to fall into that fallacy of the idea that what's just happened is going to affect the very next thing that happens. The simplest example would be flipping a coin, okay? So if you flip the coin 10 times and it came heads 10 times, what are the odds that it will come heads on the next one? So it's already been 10 in a row, right? So you're, 10 straight heads. What are the odds the next one will be heads or tails? Well, some of you may think, well, heads are hot, so they're likely to hit, or maybe tails are due, right? Tails are due to hit because it's been 10 in a row heads. The truth is, the odds of it being heads or tails are the same as they were before the 10, which is 50-50. The past situation of what's happened has no correlation to the present moment and what will happen. And if you allow yourself to get into that frame of thought or thinking with poker, you're going to walk down a rabbit hole of negative thinking that doesn't serve you at all with the intended goal of being a winning player. So before I was a professional poker player, I would bet on sports and do all kinds of gambling. And poker can be a form of gambling, but if you want to be a professional poker player, you have to avoid the impulse to just gamble for the sake of gambling. And I'd say one of the things I've had to battle or used to battle throughout my career was, say, for example, I'm on the turn and I have the nut flush draw, and I'm not getting the right price, and it's probably not a situation where I theoretically should call, but, you know what? I feel like I'm going to hit it. I feel like this time I'm just going to hit it, and I just feel like gambling this one time. So when you allow your mindset to deviate from what you know is the correct decision based solely on the fact that you feel like gambling or, you have a hunch, you want to avoid depending on hunches because you can't keep that up for very long, and you're only going to end up getting biased information. Like when you actually get it right, you're like, see, I know, but your memory has a way of forgetting all the other times when you were dead wrong. So you want to avoid making calls out of frustration or going against what you know the mathematics of the game teaches. When it comes to thinking about poker and how to approach it, a common mistake I see people make is they throw, good money after bad, if you will, where, maybe they made a mistake slightly on the flop and they played a hand they probably shouldn't have, and now they've already invested, so they've got their $60 in, and the turn card comes, and they know theoretically they should probably fold here, but they think to themselves, you know what, I've already got so much in, I might as well go all the way. This isn't a line of thought or thinking that is going to serve you. What you want to do is independently focus on each and every decision. And just because you made a mistake pre-flop or flop doesn't mean you have to compound that error by going all the way with it and saying, well, I've already butchered this hand, might as well go all the way. You're going to make mistakes in poker, that's a guarantee, but there's no reason why you can't correct those mistakes mid-street, mid-hand, mid-action. Throughout my career, I can't tell you how many times I've been in a situation where my first instinct is, you know what, this guy's got nothing, he's bluffing. And then I go through the hand and I think about the line that he took and logic starts to take over and I'm like, yeah, but the way the hand played out, it doesn't make sense that he was bluffing. And some of the times I get to a place where it's like I'm really, really close between folding or calling. And I've learned over the years that the best approach when you do that is to go with your first instinct. So your first instinct is generally based on a subconscious, on your subconscious mind that remembers or has seen a situation like this before, and it's telling you something that you can't necessarily, break down in your conscious mind, but there's something that's triggering inside you that's saying, I don't know what's up with this, but something smells fishy. So it's still important, of course, to go through the entire hand and break it down and think about, all the variables that you should when it comes to making a decision specifically on the river, but I never want you to ignore that first thought that came to your head, because often that first one, and this has been written about by Malcolm Gladwell and others in a book called Blink, which I found very powerful for poker players as well, that sort of teaches your first instinct is based on a database in your mind that is bigger and wider than your conscious mind. So when I was a teenager and I started playing Limit Hold in Toronto, I kind of wanted to impress my parents and show them that I took this seriously. So one of the things I did was I kept track of all my results and I had them, based on session length, based on dates. Before computer programs would do that for you. I also kept track of my expenses, and in addition to that, I progressed that taking actual mental notes of my opponents, things they're doing, things I may have learned throughout the session, specifically jotting down hands that I was going to analyze later, even things related to my mindset. Like I remember playing at the Mirage in the early days when smoking was allowed, and I remember writing in my notes like tilted, steaming, I'm not playing well at all. Then I moved to a seat away from the smoker, and that note continued where feeling fresher, more focused, feeling better. And obviously that's a very small thing that I can look at and say, okay, well obviously smoke tilts me, so maybe in the future if I'm going to play in a cash game, don't sit next to a smoker. Thankfully, that's not the case anymore. What I would also do when I was note-taking, I tried to be as objective as possible, because winning and losing can sort of confuse you into thinking you played well or you played poorly. Just because you won doesn't mean you played well. Just because you lost doesn't mean that you played poorly. So I would actually grade my sessions A, B, C, D, E, or F. Didn't get many E's. It was usually either an A, C, or an F. But I found that valuable to being as objective as I can be about how am I playing versus, wow, I won. I'm amazing. I'm the greatest of all time. It's not how poker works. It's so much more important from an introspective perspective to have that self-awareness, to be really honest with yourself and say, you know what, I lost today, but I think I played really, really well. Or, I won every hand today, but I really missed some value bets, and I could have really played a lot better. So let's say, for example, you flop a flush draw, you bet it, you miss. All right, you do it again, you miss. It happens 4 times in a row. Well, now you're in a situation, and this is your 5th opportunity, and you flop a flush draw in a very similar situation to the other 4. Should you be more likely to bet or less likely to bet based on the fact that you've just missed 4 times in a row? Well, if you said more or less, you're falling into a trap that casinos make millions of dollars at, which is the idea that what just happened influences what did happen. You don't want to base your decisions based on, well, last time I had aces, I lost with them. So wait, you fold them now, right? That's not a way to think about poker. You have to separate yourself from past situations and realize that every individual situation is new, fresh, and individual. So you just make the best possible decision you can with that hand in that moment, regardless of whether or not you hit 3 flush draws in a row or you miss 3 in a row.